The air was thick with smoke and the acrid stench of burnt metal as the American tank column crawled forward through the shattered streets of war-torn Europe. Every building was a skeleton, every alley a potential trap, and every shadow could hide a threat. The men inside the Sherman tanks were tense, eyes darting from crumbling rooftops to broken streets, fingers brushing the cold steel of their weapons. They had heard stories of the German King Tiger, an armored behemoth, nearly unstoppable, a force that had crushed Allied armor wherever it appeared. But no one expected to see one here, not today, not in this ruined village. And then, through the haze and ruin, it appeared massive, intimidating. The King Tiger lumbered into view, its turret swiveling with a deliberate, almost predatory grace. It moved slower than the Shermans, but every inch of it radiated power. Its thick armor glinted under the pale sunlight, and the gun barrel alone seemed large enough to swallow a tank whole. The American crews froze, hearts pounding in their chests. This was no ordinary machine. They were staring down a legend, the embodiment of fear that had haunted the Allies for months. "Holy God," muttered Private Daniels, gripping the controls so tight his knuckles whitened. It's real." The captain's eyes narrowed, scanning the massive tank. "It's a King Tiger, and if we don't take it out or capture it, it'll tear through the next convoy that comes along. We can't let that happen, not here. Not now." A tense silence settled over the crew. Every movement of the King Tiger felt deliberate, almost watchful, as if the machine itself was sizing them up. And yet there was something strange. The tank shuddered intermittently, as though fighting its own mechanics. A tiny, almost imperceptible hiccup in its engine hinted that this beast, revered and feared across Europe, might not be as invincible as legend claimed. The American crews exchanged wary glances. Capturing a King Tiger could change the course of this battle, perhaps even the war. But first, they would have to survive the encounter, and survival, they soon realized, might depend on more than just firepower. The King Tiger didn't wait. As soon as it realized it had been spotted, its massive tracks tore through the rubble, sending clouds of dust and debris into the air. The Sherman tanks responded immediately, engines growling as they accelerated, treads grinding against broken cobblestones. Every man inside felt a mixture of exhilaration and terror. They weren't just chasing a tank, they were chasing a legend. And legends, they knew, didn't surrender easily. "Stay sharp," barked Sergeant Miller, his voice cutting through the roar of engines and gunfire. "Keep it in sight! Don't let it escape!" Private Daniels hunched over the controls, his hands trembling slightly. "It's moving too fast for us to hit directly." "What do we do?" Miller's jaw tightened. "We trap it, funnel it into the alleyways. Don't let it reach the open streets. There it's unstoppable." The column split, Sherman tanks weaving through the narrow lanes, anticipating every turn the German crew might take. Explosions cracked in the distance as the King Tiger returned fire, shells whistling past like deadly arrows. Each shot hit concrete, splintering walls and throwing dust into the air, shaking the American tanks with reminders of the King Tiger's sheer firepower. Lieutenant Harris, peering through the periscope, spotted a narrow street ahead that could serve as a bottleneck. "There," he shouted. "Cut it off. Force it this way. Daniels, take the left flank and hold it steady." Daniels' hands moved instinctively, adjusting the tank's course, feeling the vibration of the engine beneath him. He could hear the others shouting instructions, feel the tension radiating through the metal hull. Every second mattered. One wrong move and the King Tiger could crush them, or worse, escape. As they pressed the chase, the soldiers found themselves improvising on the fly. Miller directed one Sherman to block an alley, while another set up a makeshift barricade of debris. They weren't just following. They were thinking, adapting, using the environment to their advantage. It was a dangerous game, one miscalculation away from disaster. Amid the chaos, small human moments surfaced. Daniels glanced at Corporal Hayes beside him, who was nervously adjusting his helmet. "Hey, you think we'll make it out of this in one piece?" Hayes gave a shaky grin. "If we don't get eaten first by that thing." "Yeah, probably. Miller overheard, and barked a laugh that didn't reach his eyes. "Focus, boys! There's no time for jokes when the devil's rolling down the street in steel armor." The king tiger, massive and deliberate, seemed almost to toy with them. Every time the Americans tried to flank it, it pivoted with eerie precision, its turret swiveling to bring the massive gun to bear. A shell detonated inches from Daniel's tank, throwing him against the controls. God damn it! It's everywhere. But the Americans weren't giving up. They knew that capturing a king tiger wasn't just a matter of luck. It was a combination of patience, strategy, and nerve. Every alleyway was a calculated risk, every maneuver a test of their wits. They began to notice small irregularities in the tank's movement, a hesitation when it shifted direction, a subtle wobble in the tracks. It was not moving as smoothly as its fearsome reputation suggested. Lieutenant Harris's voice crackled over the radio. "I think it's struggling, boys. Keep pressing! Don't let it sense weakness, but don't push too hard either." The tension was suffocating. Each crew member was acutely aware of their own vulnerability, the fragile metal shell that separated them from death. Sweat ran down Daniels's brow as he maneuvered around a collapsed building, heart pounding. Yet there was a spark of hope. If they could just exploit the tank's weakness, they could achieve something no Allied crew had done before: capture the legendary King Tiger intact. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. The chase became a battle of patience as much as skill. Every twist and turn of the King Tiger was met with American improvisation. They used debris, ruined walls, and narrow streets to channel it, forcing it toward a location where its size and weight would be more of a hindrance than an advantage. "Almost there," Miller muttered, eyes fixed on the approaching bottleneck.
"Just a little further."
"Hold it steady." The King Tiger barreled forward, unaware or perhaps indifferent to the trap that was closing around it. Its engine groaned, the vibrations hinting at strain beneath the armor. For the Americans, it was a fragile balance between awe and fear. They were chasing history, risking everything for a shot at glory, all the while aware that one misstep could mean death. And yet, despite the terror, there was determination etched on every face, every hand, every decision. They weren't just soldiers following orders. They were men testing themselves against a machine that had haunted nightmares across Europe. The chase wasn't just about the tank. It was about proving that courage, wit, and grit could triumph over even the most formidable weapon. As the King Tiger entered the narrow corridor they had orchestrated, the Americans tightened their formation. The trap was set, and for the first time, the tank's legendary aura seemed to falter, its massive frame constrained by the ruined village streets. Daniels glanced at Miller, who gave a subtle nod. This was it, the moment they had been fighting toward. The King Tiger, powerful and terrifying, was about to be cornered, and in that instant, every soldier knew the battle was far from over. But the real test, capturing the unstoppable, was just beginning. The narrow corridor closed in around the King Tiger. Rubble from collapsed buildings scraped against its massive tracks, forcing it to slow. Dust and smoke choked the air, and the distant echoes of gunfire served as a constant reminder that the battle was far from over. The American crews pressed forward cautiously, hearts hammering in their chests. After a tense chase through the shattered streets, they had finally funneled the beast into a position from which escape seemed impossible. Sergeant Miller peered through the periscope, his jaw tight, eyes scanning every inch of the massive tank. "It's stuck," he muttered, disbelief barely hidden in his voice. "Looks like the damn thing can't move forward." "Keep your distance, boys. Don't get careless." The crew exchanged wide-eyed glances. After weeks of hearing about the King Tiger's invincibility, seeing it immobilized before them was surreal. Private Daniels felt a mixture of exhilaration and terror. Every instinct screamed that approaching it was dangerous. The slightest misstep, a stray shell, a booby trap, could turn triumph into tragedy. "All right," Lieutenant Harris said over the radio, his voice steady but tense. "We're moving in. Stay alert. This thing could blow at any second." The Americans advanced slowly, treads crunching over broken pavement, weapons trained on the behemoth. The massive gun barrel loomed like the mouth of a monster, and the thick armor glinted ominously in the sunlight. For a moment, it seemed almost alive, as if the tank itself was aware of their presence. Daniels swallowed hard. "You really think the Germans just abandoned it?" he whispered to Hayes. Hayes shook his head, eyes wide. "Either they ran or it broke down. Either way, it's ours. If we don't screw this up." As they crept closer, the tank shuddered violently, the metal groaning under its own weight. Small puffs of smoke escaped from the engine vents, and a low, unsettling hiss echoed through the streets. The Americans froze, realizing the machine might be damaged beyond their comprehension. For a moment, fear overtook awe. This wasn't just a captured tank, it was a potential death trap. "Keep moving," Miller urged. "One step at a time. We're almost there." Eyes open for booby traps or mines. The first American soldier reached the side of the King Tiger, peering into the hatch. It was empty. The German crew had abandoned the tank in haste. Relief washed over them, but it was tempered by caution. Every step closer was a step into uncertainty. Daniels ran his hand along the cold, imposing metal. "It's huge. I can't believe it's actually here." Harris nodded, stepping onto a nearby rubble pile to get a better view. "We've captured history. But remember, this is still dangerous. Any moment this thing could explode, or German reinforcements could come rolling in. We're not out of the woods yet." The Americans worked carefully, inspecting the King Tiger from a safe distance. They noted the engine's hiss, the tracks jammed against debris, and the turret that still pivoted with menacing weight. Every detail reminded them of the tank's destructive power, and yet the reality of capturing it, alive, intact, was intoxicating. Miller's eyes scanned the streets for approaching enemy forces. No sign of reinforcements yet. "But keep your heads on a swivel. We're in enemy territory, and every second counts." Hayes crouched beside Daniels, whispering, "Do you think we'll actually get it back to our lines?" Daniels allowed himself a brief grin. "If we do, people won't believe us. A King Tiger. And it didn't kill us." The soldiers continued their cautious advance, tension etched into every line of their faces. They inspected the exterior, checking for rigged explosives or hidden dangers. Even as adrenaline surged, awe never left them. They were standing beside the most feared tank of the war, a machine that had turned entire Allied offensives into retreats. And yet, here it was, trapped and silent, a marvel of engineering humbled by circumstance and terrain. The Americans couldn't help but feel a surge of pride, mixed with disbelief. They had done what few thought possible. Miller clapped Daniels on the shoulder, voice tight with emotion. "Well, you boys did good. Real good, we've got it. But don't let your guard down. We still need to get it back in one piece." As the crew continued to examine their prize, the sun glinted off the King Tiger's armor, casting long shadows over the rubble-strewn streets. The adrenaline began to ebb, replaced by a contemplative quiet. They had cornered the beast, and in that moment time seemed to slow. Every soldier knew this was a story they would tell for the rest of their lives, an impossible capture, a mix of triumph and fear, a moment where courage had faced a legend and won. But beneath the awe and excitement, there was an unspoken tension. The King Tiger's engine coughed, a low, ominous groan that reminded them this was far from over. The tank might be trapped now, but its story was not finished, and neither was theirs. In that instant, standing beside the immobilized giant, the Americans realized they were holding history in their hands. Every heartbeat was a mix of triumph, fear, and anticipation. The impossible had been achieved. Yet, as they prepared to secure the tank for transport, a subtle vibration beneath their feet hinted at the next challenge. And the King Tiger's full story was only just beginning. The morning sun glinted off the King Tiger's armor as the American crew gathered around their captured prize. The air was heavy with the acrid smell of diesel and smoke, but beneath it all was the unmistakable thrill of triumph. After weeks of chasing rumors, stories, and half-seen silhouettes, they were standing beside the most feared tank of the war. It was hard to believe. It seemed unreal, almost dreamlike. Lieutenant Harris circled the massive machine, peering up at the turret. "You realize what we're looking at here?" he muttered. Tiger II, over 70 tons of armor, an 88mm gun that can punch through just about anything we've got. Sergeant Miller crouched beside the tracks, tracing a hand along the thick metal plating. 200mm at the front, over 80 on the sides. God, it's like trying to scratch a mountain with a fingernail. Private Daniels couldn't stop grinning as he ran a hand over the turret's massive gun barrel. "Imagine taking this thing for a spin," he joked, voice tinged with awe. "Bet it eats fuel like nobody's business. Hell, probably needs a small army to just keep it moving," Hayes snorted. "And a crane to lift it over that rubble back there. Good luck with that, genius." The crew shared a laugh, but even in humor, awe never left their eyes. They explored every angle of the tank, marveling at the ingenuity that had created a machine capable of dominating entire battlefields. Each detail was fascinating. The interleaved wheels designed to distribute weight. The enormous turret ring, allowing the massive gun to swivel almost effortlessly. The armor sloped to deflect shells. Daniels peered into the open hatch, his brow furrowing. "Looks clean inside. But the engine compartment, something doesn't feel right." Harris stepped closer, listening to the faint cough of the tank's engine. "Yeah, I noticed that too. It shudders a little when you turn it over. Could be minor, could be serious. Either way, we need to keep it in mind," Miller frowned. "Even still, just look at it. This thing survived battles we weren't even aware of. And now, here we are, standing next to it. It's like holding history in our hands." They took turns, examining the massive gun, marveling at the precision of its engineering. Daniels tried to imagine loading a shell into the 88mm cannon, thinking about the recoil, the weight, the sheer destruction it could unleash. Even jokes about riding it like a carnival ride couldn't mask their admiration and nervous respect. "Anyone else get the feeling this thing is almost alive?" Hayes whispered, half in jest, half in awe. "Tracks groaning, turrets swiveling. It's like it knows we're poking around." Harris gave a small, wry smile. "If tanks could talk, I'm guessing it'd tell us to watch our step." As the crew continued their inspection, small signs of trouble became more evident. The engine vented faint puffs of smoke, the gears emitted a low, irregular hum, and the tracks occasionally ground against themselves with an unsettling noise. These weren't catastrophic failures, but they hinted at the immense stress the tank had endured. Miller ran a hand over the suspension system. "See this? It's holding up barely. I wouldn't want to be the one driving it more than a mile without a full crew of mechanics ready." Despite the minor concerns, the soldiers were caught between fear and exhilaration. This was the legendary King Tiger, a machine that had dominated European battlefields, and yet here it was, vulnerable, almost human in its flaws. They moved carefully, documenting every observation, snapping mental notes of its weaknesses and quirks. Daniels crouched beside a track and shook his head. "I still can't get over it. All those stories, all that fear, and it's right here. And we can touch it?" Hayes grinned. "Touch it, sure. But I wouldn't want to be the one who has to push it if the engine dies." Laughter rippled through the group, a brief respite from the tension. They joked about riding it through the streets, imagining themselves as tank commanders in some grand parade. The humor was nervous, a way to cope with the enormity of what they had achieved. But even as they joked, the subtle signs of mechanical strain continued to nag at them. Every shudder of the engine, every uneven turn of the turret, reminded them that triumph often came with a price. The tank had survived battles, explosions, and endless miles of terrain, but it had not survived unscathed. Harris straightened, eyes scanning the horizon. "We've got the beast, boys, but we can't let excitement blind us. Getting it back to our lines is going to be the real challenge." Miller nodded, placing a hand on the massive hull. "One step at a time. Right now, we admire. Later, we work. Just don't let anyone underestimate what we're dealing with." Daniels took a deep breath, running a hand over the armor again. "It's beautiful. Terrifying. Perfect, and yet not quite." It's like it's smiling at us, daring us to see what we can do. The crew stood in quiet awe, the morning sun glinting off the King Tiger's metal like molten steel. It was a moment of victory, but tinged with suspense. The tank had been captured, yes, but it carried its secrets and its flaws with it. Every shudder, every low groan of metal under stress whispered that their work was only beginning, and as they prepared to plan the next phase, moving the King Tiger to Allied lines, the subtle rhythm of its troubled engine seemed to whisper a warning. Triumph can be intoxicating, but even legends have weaknesses. The soldiers laughed lightly, tension easing just enough to make the task ahead feel achievable. But none of them could shake the sense that the real test was still to come. The King Tiger's massive tracks groaned against the mud and debris as the American crew prepared for the most dangerous part of their mission, moving the captured beast back to Allied lines. What had seemed awe-inspiring in a quiet village now felt like a colossal, unwieldy burden. Every inch of terrain became a test of skill and nerve. Broken bridges, churned-up roads, and collapsed buildings turned their path into a treacherous obstacle course. Lieutenant Harris leaned over the controls, brow furrowed. "Slow and steady, Daniels. We can't afford a single misstep. One wrong turn and we're toast, or worse, the tank is." Private Daniels adjusted the throttle, feeling the King Tiger lurch under him. The engine shuddered, emitting a low, uneasy groan that rattled through the hull. "It feels heavy, heavier than I thought, almost like it's fighting us." The crew exchanged tense glances. Every turn of the massive turret, every grind of the tracks against the uneven road, reminded them that this machine, as legendary as it was, had limits. And the more they pushed it, the more those limits seemed to edge closer. As they advanced, the distant crack of gunfire set nerves on edge. Enemy snipers were rumored to be in the area, and every shadow could conceal a rifle aimed at their position. The King Tiger offered protection, yes, but only if it remained mobile. One stalled engine or jammed track, and they would be sitting ducks in a war zone. Miller muttered under his breath, scanning the terrain. "Keep your eyes open. Every inch counts. That thing may have survived the front, but it's not indestructible, and neither are we." The tank lurched suddenly as it hit a patch of soft mud, throwing Daniels against the controls. Hayes swore under his breath, grabbing the handholds. It's not just heavy, it's unpredictable. One moment it moves fine, the next it wants to bury itself in the mud. Harris grit his teeth. "Just keep it steady. Focus on the rhythm, feel it, don't fight it." Even as they cautiously pressed onward, small, alarming signs continued. The engine coughed and sputtered. The gears emitted odd clunks, and the massive tracks occasionally slipped against stones and debris. Every sound carried a weight of foreboding, reminding them that the King Tiger's fearsome reputation could not guarantee a safe journey. Hours passed like minutes, adrenaline stretching their nerves taut. They were exhausted, yet unable to relax, every instinct focused on keeping the tank moving and avoiding disaster. Each precarious crossing, over broken bridges or crumbling roads, felt like threading a needle with death itself waiting below. "Are we sure this thing's going to make it?" Daniels asked quietly, his voice almost drowned by the engine's groan. Harris didn't answer immediately, instead watching the tank carefully as it shifted weight, shuddered, and slowly crept forward. Finally he said, "I don't know, but right now it's our only shot. Keep your hands on the controls and your eyes open. That's all we can do." The crew's minds raced as the landscape grew even more hostile, fallen trees, jagged rubble, and deep puddles threatening to swallow the King Tiger whole. And yet, for all the danger, the soldiers pressed on, driven by a mixture of awe, duty, and the hope of seeing their legendary prize reach safety. Still, as the tank groaned and strained under its own weight, there was no denying the truth gnawing at their thoughts. This beast, as formidable as it was not invincible. Every cough of its engine, every judder of its tracks whispered that disaster could strike at any moment, and when it did, there would be no second chance. The Americans pushed onward, hearts pounding, eyes scanning for danger, minds aware that the King Tiger's true challenge had only just begun. And deep down, each of them knew that survival and victory would depend as much on the machine's limits as on their own skill and courage. The King Tiger groaned one last time before everything fell silent. The massive tracks, which had thundered over rubble and mud for hours, froze in place. The engine coughed, spluttered, and died. A thick puff of smoke rose from the vents, curling into the grey sky. The American crew sat stunned inside the Sherman tanks, staring at the immobile giant before them. "Wait, it just stopped?" Daniels muttered, disbelief creeping into his voice. He tapped the throttle, then shifted gears. Nothing. The King Tiger wasn't moving. Miller's mouth fell open. That can't be right. This thing, it's supposed to be unstoppable. Hayes leaned closer, peering at the massive tank as if it were some trick of the light. Unstoppable? My ass, it's dead. Completely dead. For a few moments, all they could do was stare, the absurdity of the situation sinking in. The tank that had haunted Allied nightmares, crushed Sherman after Sherman, now sat helpless in the middle of the battlefield, rendered useless, not by firepower or strategy, but by its own failing mechanics. Daniel shook his head in disbelief. "I mean, we spent hours chasing this thing, dodging every shot it fired, and now it's just broken." Miller let out a short, incredulous laugh, the kind that teetered between relief and frustration. "The terrible Tiger, huh? Turns out the scariest part was the engine." The irony wasn't lost on the crew. They had been ready for a fight, expecting a final confrontation with a mechanical monster. Instead, the King Tiger had surrendered silently, defeated by the limits of its own design. Harris clapped Daniels on the shoulder, still shaking his head. "Well, I guess this is one way to capture history. A King Tiger, immobile, intact, but more fragile than anyone expected." The soldiers moved cautiously closer, noting the smoke rising from the engine and the occasional groan of stressed metal. The giant tank, once the symbol of fear and dominance, now seemed almost vulnerable, a hulking testament to the imperfection of even the most legendary machines. Miller's eyes swept over the streets, alert to danger. "Enjoy the moment, boys, but don't get cocky. She may be down, but we're still in enemy territory. And this beast, now she's a liability, not a prize." The crew exchanged uneasy smiles. Triumph and frustration collided in equal measure. They had cornered and captured one of the most feared weapons of the war, but it was a hollow victory in some ways, reminding them that glory could be as unpredictable as war itself. And as the smoke drifted lazily upward, the soldiers realized that their true challenge was only beginning. Moving the immobile King Tiger to safety would test every ounce of skill, patience, and courage they had left. The streets were quiet now, save for the faint groan of the King Tiger's stalled engine and the distant echoes of battle. The American crew stood around the massive tank, taking stock of their impossible achievement. They had cornered, captured, and inspected one of the most feared machines in the war, but now, faced with its immobility, they had to decide what to do next. "Repair it?" Daniels asked, looking skeptical. "We don't even have the right parts. Or a crane big enough to lift it if something else breaks." Harris shook his head, running a hand over the cold, armored hull. "Forget repairs. We can leave it as a war trophy, a story for the men back home. Not every victory has to end with a parade. Some are just surreal." Miller laughed quietly, the sound tinged with disbelief. "Imagine explaining this one. Yeah, we captured a King Tiger, but it broke down before it ever reached the front line." Hayes grinned. "I guess it's better than getting blown to pieces by it. At least we get to live and tell the story." The absurdity of the moment wasn't lost on any of them. Here lay the King Tiger, a machine that had dominated nightmares and headlines alike, humbled not by guns or courage, but by gears and grease. It was a reminder that even the mightiest tools of war carried their own vulnerabilities, and no matter how powerful, nothing was truly invincible. As the crew surveyed the streets, They reflected on the strange mix of emotions that swirled within them: triumph, relief, awe, and a touch of ironic humor. They had faced fear head-on, stared down a legend, and lived to tell the tale. The king tiger might never roll into battle again, but it had already left its mark on history and on the men who had captured it. Daniels ran a hand along the turret one last time.
We did it.
We actually did it. And the story will be unbelievable. Miller clapped him on the shoulder. Unbelievable, yes, but true. That's what counts. The soldiers stood in silence for a moment, letting the weight of their achievement settle. The streets of the ruined village seemed calmer now, the echoes of chaos fading into memory. They had captured a legend, but the king tiger would remain a monument to both fear and fragility, a reminder that war, for all its planning and strategy, is often unpredictable and strange. With a final glance at the hulking, immobile machine, they turned back toward their convoy, ready to continue the journey home. The king tiger had been tamed, at least for now. And in the quiet aftermath, the crew understood the full measure of their experience. They had survived. They had witnessed history, and they had done it together. The tank never reached the front line, but its story, its legend, would live on forever.